Welcome back to another episode of Currency Cloud's Superhero Spotlight series. And what a Friday afternoon we have in store. I'm delighted to have on the show Carl Turnbull from Starling Bank. Carl, welcome.
Thanks, Richard. No pressure.
No pressure whatsoever. Penultimate one for me, yeah. But listen, so we call it a Spotlight series, and I think unless you've kind of had your head in the sand with paying no attention to kind of UK fintech, you'll know who Starling Bank are. But perhaps we can kind of shine a bit of a spotlight on maybe some of the aspects of Starling that people aren't too familiar with as we cover some topics throughout the show. But why don't you give us a refresher for those who may have forgotten who Starling Bank are and where
Absolutely delighted. So look, Starling Bank, founded by Anne Bowden, CEO, ex-Allied Irish, ex-ABN AMRO Bank, spent a lot of time within global transaction services. So from a global perspective, very, very familiar with transaction banking. And she sort of felt that at one point, SMEs, retail and institutional clients were not being serviced in a certain way. And there was other ways that we could do things better. Certainly from a connectivity perspective, right? She's an engineer at heart, so technology was very much at the forefront of her mind and everything that she wanted to do. So she founded the bank a few years ago, essentially as a retail organisation, then morphed into SME, and then we decided to take the infrastructure and the tech to launch into institutional banking. But if we look at where we've come from in the last 4 to 5 years from getting the banking license, I mean, a phenomenal trajectory in terms of client acquisition and success. So where we are, I mean, effectively we landed at the end of last year making a profit in November. One of the very few fintechs, I think, or challenger banks, certainly in the last few years. Retail client base is now over 2 million. We've exceeded our target in terms of SME clients. We're due to finish the end of this year around 230. We're now at 336,000 clients. Helped a little bit by the lending program, but still brilliant in terms of client acquisition. Deposits were over 6 billion. We're awash with deposits. The natural evolution then was to move into the lending space. Beginning of last year, interestingly, we hadn't actually built our lending proposition. We didn't have a platform. We didn't have the people and the credit analysts and the ability to lend. And we had a strategic goal of lending a very small amount by the end of last year. Then COVID hit. And Anne quite rightly said to the government, we'll be one of the 44 banks to lend under the government loan schemes, the CBILS and the BIBLS loan schemes. And literally within a matter of a few weeks, we'd built that whole proposition. We'd hired the folks to be able to do it, and we began lending to the SMEs, those vulnerable SMEs, certainly in the UK specifically, either existing Starling clients or new Starling clients. And over the last 15 to 16 months, Richard, we're now at 2.2 billion, I think, in terms of lending, which is just a phenomenal journey. We've also partnered with some brokers, so we've been very visible in the market with Funding Circle, Funding Options to help, and part of the RLS, the loan scheme as well. So massive amount of work on the lending, but that was an absolute natural evolution, having raised deposits to then go into the lending space. One of the funding rounds a couple of years ago was to build 52 products for SMEs specifically. That business case was covering lending as one, multi-currency as one, and part of multi-currency was US dollars, which we can talk about, but that was a proposition that we launched again about 15 months ago. We wanted to do something slightly different in the market to our competitors, and we're using Currency Cloud to power that solution. We can talk more about that in a little bit. So US dollars, and then also we still continue to apply for our Euro banking license out of Dublin. So we have a separate team there, a separate board, separate country head, COO, and we're looking now at the technology aspect of it in terms of how we service our customers and where from, and how we use and replicate the work that we've already done, whilst working in parallel with the CBI in Ireland to get that European license. And that will help us then access certain key markets. Again, Anne's been very vocal about those markets that we look to go into, whether it's Netherlands, Germany or France. So really sort of interesting over the last 3 years in terms of how we've kind of built that. But as I said at the top of the call, initially it was retail, then it was SME, and then we thought, well, actually, we've got this infrastructure, this technology. There's a massive demand of new entrants, underserviced institutional clients, whether that's across fintech, PSP, non-bank FIs, asset brokers, even to a degree tier 2, tier 3 banks, but equally we're relevant to a tier 1 perspective. If we support their digital part of the organization. So that again was quite natural that we moved into that space to start offering that technology.
And I think let's come on to that. And I think you also said at the top of the show that no pressure, but I think what you've just talked about there, and it's very apt that we call this a superhero series because Starling very much are one of the superheroes of kind of UK fintech, and what you're doing is phenomenal. And it's really exciting, and in such a short space of time.
Yeah,
as you said, I think what founded in 2014 was the original kind of idea. Banking license 2016. You said 2 years ago, 42 products that you committed to.
Well, 52
products. Sorry.
Yeah, and we continue to build. I mean, it's just having worked in large institutions, which frankly is like trying to turn an oil tanker, and frustratingly having to spend many months writing strategic papers, workshops, and trying to build a roadmap to a degree, sort of 12 to 18 months out. What's interesting here, there's a couple of key things I think which helps accelerate and makes us very agile. And one is that we kind of look between sort of 4, 6, 8 weeks out. If I talk to anybody, if I talk to Anne or any of the execs about something in 3 or 4 months' time, I'm kind of, we're not interested unless we can do and deliver it in a very, very short time frame. We don't want to be doing it. And the other
which is unique for a bank, right?
Yeah,
so you're pretty talking 3, 4 decades. I mean, 3, 4 years out, right? But so if they're saying, listen, come back until you've got something that I can see within 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I'm one of the very few bankers in the organization. So the majority are engineers, the majority are, very, very technical folks writing code, very used to building solutions and solving problems. And if I have an issue with a client and a problem to solve, I don't have to go to a huge IT or project management team to raise a ticket and finally get onto a roadmap in 6 months for somebody to actually develop and support. I can very, very quickly mobilize through our CIO and our engineers, who we talk to on a weekly basis. We have a dedicated team allocated to banking services. We talk every Friday. If there's anything I need or anything that needs to be resolved or enhanced, then I can table it at that meeting. And we move very, very quickly into a sort of test and build a test and production phase. Obviously, if it's something that we can replicate, but we have a very, very flat organization. As I said, we don't sit writing endless strategy papers and business cases. We get through that process very, very quickly. The board meets once a month. Typically, the CIO and the chief banking officer can make a decision very, very quickly as to whether to move ahead and implement something. We mobilize resources and we get it done. And I think the biggest difference is that we'd rather kind of build a minimum viable product, MVP product, get it into production, and then start learning as we go and refine as we go. I think completion over perfection is probably sometimes the best way of looking at it. But rather than keeping something in the background and continuously testing, by the time you've launched it, pretty much the client's needs have moved on and it's no longer relevant.
And there's so much to unpick from that. I think that kind of that ethos, that execution focus, fanatical about getting stuff done and into the hands of the customer, obviously comes from Anne and her drive. That's probably quite a far cry from some of your background. As you said, probably one of the only bankers in the firm, and you were Merrill Lynch, you were at RBS, I believe. So is that quite refreshing for someone like you in your role to be able to just get stuff really quickly? Yeah,
it is, and it's quite strange because we have two products. One is a relatively vanilla and simple product. The other one is completely on the other side of the spectrum, something that I'd never been involved before. So that was a real sort of pull and a challenge and something that I was eager to get involved in. And so let me explain. So we have on one side payments as a service and the other side banking as a service. And a lot of folks in the market get these things muddled up and they kind of morph into one.
Yep.
The payments as a service is essentially agency banking. It's providing indirect access to the UK faster payment scheme with underlying operational and settlement accounts, virtual accounts that clients can open and close at will, all through APIs, all really whizzy, very, very fast, excellent. We take a reliance on our client when we go through an onboarding process, so therefore they can open and close at will millions of accounts underneath a header account, and they can then offer services to their underlying clients. So we are there servicing banks, NBFIs, PSPs, fintechs, EMIs, folks who have just entered the market, who have particularly just got a license, who may not be on the strategic roadmap of some of the larger legacy institutions.
Yep.
They all have hurdle rates. They all have, a corporate banker that they need to assign to every name. They want a client to buy multiple products: cash trade, custody, prime brokerage, FX, DCM markets. We're very happy operating in this space with very, very low operating costs, no legacy systems, to be able to be relevant to any size of client. So I will get calls reactively on every day for somebody wanting to bank with us. But that's the very much vanilla services.
And you can do that, as you said, because in terms of kind of cost of servicing that, it's so much lower than a traditional one. But is it also because actually you're kind of, it's not an obligation, but you have a passion for the fintech industry itself?
Absolutely.
And that's what's driving it. And actually it's kind of this banking for all concept to say, actually, we want to help fuel innovation within the industry itself.
Correct. I mean, we're there to help foster competition and create competition and bring new ideas and new technology and new communication methods to the market. So absolutely, we want to help our peers and customers within that space to achieve that. But as I mentioned also earlier, we're also very, very relevant to tier one organizations, and that again was a little bit alien to me coming here, because I thought, well, what on earth can we possibly offer? Well, if you think of a tier one who either is operating with a license in the UK but has such massive legacy systems and multiple payment systems, in order to accelerate a digital proposition or a digital service to a client, they need to potentially partner with another institution that can help them accelerate to the market. Otherwise, if they wait for the legacy organization to catch up, that they'll have missed their opportunity. So without mentioning any names, we did support a tier one name a couple of years ago in that space, but I quite often get calls from overseas institutions to say, look, we're looking at opening in the UK. We want to create a digital bank or digital proposition. We won't be competing with Starling. We will, for instance, be following expats into the UK and providing wealth services. Therefore, we want to retain that client base and offer current accounts and operational accounts. So therefore, for a relatively small client base, this actually makes sense. It doesn't make any sense for us to build a digital bank ourselves. We want to get quick to market, so perhaps we can partner with you. And this sort of comes onto my banking as a service. This is really us using that to power other, sometimes non-regulated institutions or regulated institutions that don't have the correct permissions to be able to onboard and hold and operate almost like a current retail account in the UK. So we do this for Raisin. I have a pipeline of opportunities that I'm talking to other institutions in offering the same sort of thing. And for Raisin, which is in the market, they offer a UK and European actually savings programs that you and I can go onto their app. They provide all the client distribution, the client acquisition, the customer service, the relationship. But you go onto the Raisin app and you say, I want to save into any one of 15 partner banks. We actually would onboard you as the underlying client. So we do the onboarding, take the risk, the due diligence, do the KYC. And then as soon as you want to pay into a settlement, as soon as you want to settle into a savings account, the money comes into a Starling bank account and then settles through faster payments. And then we deal with the repatriation coming back. And that was a kind of service that I didn't really understand when I first walked into Starling 2.5 years ago. But one that was had already been mobilized for Raisin, and quite a few other customers who want to explore the same sort of solution, which is really interesting. And not everybody is offering that.
Well, I was going to say this is one of the things I think that make you unique. And you said earlier in terms of, and before we came live, we were talking about, I guess, the fintech landscape, certainly in the UK, and how we have some really interesting fintechs and really successful fintechs, but they start as kind of programs focused on one or other, like a retail or SME type business. You now have independent kind of BaaS providers out there. But that, I guess, that foresight from Anne and team to say, actually, we need to do all three to become a fintech bank, and to really supercharge the fintech industry in the UK and beyond, right? Because I know we have designs, or you have designs to take this outside of just our shores here.
Absolutely, you're right. I mean, the institutional space, as I said earlier, is really underserved. Legacy institutions are quite selective in terms of who they want to bank. Their strategy changes year on year. If they look at certain industry segments, that one might be at higher risk than another. So they have this kind of in and out mentality, but we're kind of there open for all. And I think with Anne's background, having worked in that transaction banking space, it was only very natural that we used our technology through the APIs to be able to do that. And we onboard, this is the other thing, we onboard folks within 6 to 8 weeks, providing they meet a certain eligibility criteria. We outsource our compliance and due diligence, and we get a report, provide there's no huge amount of remediation. I take that to our executive risk committee, literally within a matter of days, and I get an approval and we start onboarding. And then the engineering team that we talk to on a weekly basis, they're deployed and they help to onboard. So, from the initial discussion with a client to actually onboard and go live within 8 weeks, again, from large corporations that I've worked in before, is just frankly unheard of.
So listen, out of all the interviews I've done this week, I think this is one where I've asked the least amount of questions on my list, because I think we got through one there, and we're almost running out of time. But I think that just goes to show that, the incredible work that Anne and team are doing over at Starling, and why you've been so successful. But I guess, and we've got plenty of questions that are coming in that I unfortunately won't get a chance to get onto now. But what's next? I mean, it's what's current. What are the exciting things that are coming out of Starling? And I know you had some investment earlier this year. You announced the investment earlier this year. Yeah. What is it you're using that for? What's on the roadmap for? Well, I would say 6 months, but at Starling it's more like 6 weeks.
Absolutely right. I mean, look, we still have quite a few of those 52 products that I mentioned. One tagged as multi-currency, that could be 50 products in itself, depending on what kind of strategy you have. If you have a hub, a regional, or a local strategy. The dollars was interesting. So we want to mirror what we're doing and what we've done in dollars. And that, as I said, you guys have helped partner with that. But what we try to do there is something a little different, rather than just allowing our clients, SMEs, and soon, hopefully, institutional clients to make and receive a dollar payment or a multi-currency payment. For dollars, we've allowed our clients to be able to open and close virtual accounts held in the US through yourselves and another provider. That allows them 3 things. Number 1, better cost and commercials. Number 2, better value dating from those payments to be able to make instant, same-day, urgent payments. And also access to the local ACH payment system. And what that means is that they can make a payment, they can take a receipt in the US, and they can hold that liquidity in a US dollar account, therefore protects them against any FX. A lot of clients that we speak to, they end up going down a hub route, multi-currency IBAN perhaps in the UK, or a hub solution, multi-currencies held in one location as opposed to locally, and certainly not having that ability to protect against FX and access the local clearing systems. So that's just kind of one element that I'm looking forward to pursuing a little bit further and hopefully offering that to my clients, and building out the banking as a service proposition. As I said, at the moment, the solution is set up for the settlement of almost saving schemes, but there's no reason why that can't be offered as a fully fledged current account with cards, with lending, with everything else. And that's, I think, when it really becomes sort of banking as a service, banking in a box for another provider to take, and then, us partner and they offer that to their own client base as well.
Well, I think we could do a whole series just with Starling, I think. And the other thing I like about Starling is, we talked about, fostering competition earlier. And actually is setting a benchmark for kind of UK fintechs to look up to and say, listen, this is possible to launch these really interesting kind of fintech-like banking products or banks. I think it's commendable. Thank you so much for coming on. We are out of time. I'm being virtually prodded to say, unfortunately, we're up. But where can people kind of hear more about Starling and more from yourself, Carl?
Find me on LinkedIn for a start. Look at the Starling website, Starling Bank website. We are in there as banking services. If you look at the partnerships element of that, but yeah, launch yourself into the website. Find me on LinkedIn, and always more than happy to make some time to talk to you.
Fantastic, Carl. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Cheers. Have a good weekend.
And you.
Bye bye.